Hi everyone, my name is Jonas from Koalify and welcome to another episode of Dirty Data Secrets, where we highlight dirty data problems in HubSpot, obviously. Today I have Markus with me, and Markus is a co-founder of vizrm. Markus, can you please introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, thanks, Jonas. Good to be on the show. So I'm Markus. I've been in B2B sales for my entire career, basically, and founder of vizrm since we launched the company about 4 years ago.
Okay, cool. And you clearly have a background in sales and using HubSpot as like a sales user. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience using HubSpot as a sales CRM?
Yeah, I've actually used HubSpot in different companies, so both as a seller, as a sales leader, sales manager, and now as a founder. So I think, yeah, seen all the different flavors, so to say, from very complex to very simple, and seen, I think, like the over configuration and the over process version, and the very lean startup-y versions, of course. In my experience, especially from a seller user perspective, of course, I've also used other CRM systems. From my experience, for me, it's one of the more intuitive and easy to use tools that really helps you to also be productive, because in the end, for us salespeople, the CRM is it's a tool that can be both a pain and a gain, I would say, depending on how it's set up and how it's lived in the sales culture as well.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. And if you look at dirty data from a sales point of view, like how did you experience that?
Great question. I'm looking a little bit from both like the sales manager and the sales rep perspective, because for me as a sales rep, I think the most annoying dirty data moment is when you take over an existing customer from another rep. So say you come in a new role, or in many companies, like territories are changing every fiscal year, so you kind of take over a bunch of accounts, and it's kind of the dirty data moment when you first go in and see, the notes that are not there, or the contacts that, have an email address and that's it. Or, the contacts that have an email address, but they haven't been working in this company for 5 years, and you just you don't get a reply, or you get like this email is not existing anymore. So I think that's kind of the most painful moment, probably from a rep perspective. But obviously reps are also responsible for that, right? So, and from a sales manager perspective, I mean, in the end of the day, it's like I'm looking at a forecast, I'm looking at a pipeline, I'm trying to understand, like, is this real? Right. And if I don't have the data in there, it's just like I usually I'm either like in one of my previous roles, I've been working in a fast growing company where, as the head of sales, I had to report to the investors, and that's like the most stressful moments you can imagine, most stressful meetings you can imagine, if you're talking to a VC manager, and you must have your your data.
Yeah.
Right. You want to present the right data, and you want to be accurate on what you're going to deliver. So you need to grind through the CRM to read through all the emails and kind of ideally the call notes they've done or not done. That's really painful. So kind of this, unless you have a good system and a culture where the reps understand that they are providing helpful inputs, not only for themselves to, win the deal, but also for the company to learn how things are going and take the right measures in the end of the day, right? That can be very dirty data moments.
Yeah. But interesting to have like the two angles, like from a sales rep point of view, where it's really about the contact and the company data that needs to be clean in order to work on the accounts. And on the other hand, from the sales manager, where the deal pipeline is becoming more important, with like visibility on what's actually happening, what business you're expecting, how things are going. Interesting angle. And you mentioned the cliche already, where like sales reps are often responsible for the mess in the CRM. How did you experience that yourself? Like, why is that? Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. I think when the system has been set up incorrectly. I went through in one of my roles with a very big corporation. We had an initiative for data cleanliness that was on on a very popular, very big CRM tool that we all don't want to talk about here. But it was really like they had executive dashboards where they were just looking at data fields and you had a KPI to have those data fields populated. That's the wrong management approach, because in the end, we just all like put 2 words into each of those fields. Like we had to fill like those 20 fields on each account and each deal on each record, right? So in the end, the data wasn't good, right? It was just like populated and then quickly outdated. What I found to be the right approach is that if you build a system that actually helps the sellers to be more productive, be more efficient, then they'll use it and they'll generate data along the way that will then educate the decision making of the leadership in terms of, processes, forecasts, tools, campaigns that we are doing. So I think, yes, reps in many cases are responsible for the mess in there, but it's like the symptom, not the cause of the situation.
Yeah, interesting insight. It's a neat shared responsibility. The process needs to be clean and clear, and then it's easier for the reps to generate correct data. What recommendations would you give, or what have you seen when things were set up incorrectly or better to generate better data through the sales reps?
Yeah. So like an example that I'm coming across all the time in B2B sales, we like to use a methodology. It's called MEDDIC. There's different qualification and criteria that are tracked usually on attributes, either on a deal or on different records. And then you kind of use it as a health indicator for a deal. If you understand those really good, you have a good understanding of where this deal is progressing. Unless you haven't been properly trained on like how you are using this MEDDIC philosophy, it's coming back to people either not putting the data in there or putting trash in there. A lot of people are thinking like, yes, I need to fill those. And it can be engineered from MEDDIC, with like it's an acronym like metrics, economic buyer, etc. It can be like MEDDIC, and it can become like 15 letters. So that is kind of like boil it down to what you actually think is useful for the reps to understand the deal, and helps them to in the end build out an understanding. Then a lot of sales leaders also think like, yeah, I need to have this on a deal like from stage 1 on, but actually it's something that is evolving, and you gotta have a process to review those things and have the reps go and update that data, right? So if you set up a proper stage gate process in a pipeline, then you'll be able to support the reps to kind of nudge them back to, have you thought about this again? Like, have you added new contacts? Is there a change in like who the stakeholders are, right? Have you discovered new business problems? Have you discovered new value levers? Like in my line of business with sales cycles of up to 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, right? Things significantly change, right? Yeah. The value proposition changed, the product changed, the markets changed, like politics in the company and on the geographical side changed, right? So the data I put in there, like when I created the deal, is like, yeah, that's 2 years old. So I think that's kind of bringing that together in a very classic example. The other is like for forecasting, there's things around sales stages that should be automated. There's things like how confident is a rep that they're gonna make a deal, like forecast categories, all those things. Unless they don't have a proper process and a proper definition, you'll get bad data in the end of the day. So if you can design a sales process that actually is something that people have on their desk or they have it on the wall, I have like mine over there, it has clearly defined gates and it has clearly defined criteria of things that I want to have done and that I want to have confirmed with a customer before I move it to the next stage or before I put it in another forecast category. But in so many companies, I get in as a rep and I'm told that's the sales stages, like that's how it is in the CRM, use it, like update it. Yeah. But everybody has a different understanding what it means to have a solution stage.
Yeah, sounds very familiar. Clearly defined stages, boil it down to the essentials, probably like less is more. If you don't really need it, don't include it into the pipeline. We're talking a lot about your experience as a sales or in a sales environment. How did that inspire you to build your own product and build your own company?
Yeah, so in the end of the day, I had a problem as a sales manager, a tooling problem, where as I said, I was working mainly in companies, very large industrial regulated companies where you have like sales processes over years and very big deals and very complex deals with like up to 30, 40, 50 stakeholders, and very often like business models where you have an initial transaction that is rather small, and then you have following transactions that are going through this enterprise in different regions and different production sites in the industrial space, very often like different, just physically different places, different manufacturing plants, right? So I really needed something that helps me to better understand the relationships that people are having on a formal hierarchical level, but also like where are they in this company? What's their sentiment? How do they like to talk to? Do they like to talk to us? Because in the end of the day, as a salesperson, you're the only thing that you can really do to get business is like convince people by talking to them, right? In some sort of communication, convincing people. So the question is like, who are the people that I need to talk to, and who are the people that I can talk to, right? So bringing that together, that's really what we're doing at vizrm, providing all the tools that are, supporting that in identifying the right people to speak to, understanding who they are, what roles they're having, what influence they are having inside a company on my specific different various transactions that I may have, and all of that in a very complex setting. And that can be, large industrial corporations, can be large financial institutes, banks, insurers, and that can be governance. So many of our customers are also in a governmental contracting situation where it's especially interesting to work in. And one of the credos, thanks to us being based in Germany, is that we have very strong opinions and regulations around how we are using personal information. So we've very early on decided, and kind of on the one side, because we think it's the right thing to do from a regulatory and privacy perspective, but also because I think the CRM needs to be the single source of truth for all the data, because we don't want to end up with dirty data, right, in different places. That is why vizrm is fully integrated into HubSpot, and that is why we store all of the data that our app produces directly back into HubSpot, and we don't kind of store any of the information on our own databases, except for just like the IDs of the records in HubSpot. So I think that is a very important bit when it comes to having clean data, that also other tools, be it, vizrm or any other tools in the end of the day, that you'll have the CRM and you'll have HubSpot as the single source of truth where we get those things updated, ideally always automatically.
Yeah, that makes sense. You wanted to get a better overview of complex environments you were selling into, being at banks or industrial organizations. I can imagine that if there are multiple people involved, you want to have like the visual map to make it clear. Really curious to see how it looks like. So if you could share your screen and give a quick overview, that would be very useful.
Absolutely. Okay. So I'll start here on a company record in HubSpot, where I have my vizrm plugin over here. So yeah, as you mentioned, we are looking at mapping out the buying centers, the accounts, the relationships in there, right? So I'm here on a company record inside of HubSpot. I'll have my account map over here, so I can just click on here, get a first impression. If I want to go in here as a user, see some of the different concepts we have here, like placeholders, like the different teams, groups that we have. If I want to go ahead and have a further look, like use some of our analytics tools as well, I'll jump over here and I see like all the different influences that I'll have. I can get all my data from HubSpot on here, so you'll see just the job titles, but I can get in like any custom attribute that I have. We are able to manage the relationships between different company records. So you can use the vizrm interface to really easily adjust the relationships between companies, manage this complexity as well, where we often have like in large corporations, like all the subsidiaries, the multinationals, right? But we can also then go in here and do some analytics, run some heat maps about activity, for example, right? I can go in here and see like who are the contacts that I've contacted in the last 30, 90, whatever days, right? Get that based off of my activity information from HubSpot, right? We get the deals in here, you get more advanced capabilities. How do we manage the relationship between certain persons that are acting in different deals in different places inside there. And some advanced capabilities. We also have some connection through a browser extension going into LinkedIn, so we can also go from here and find more contact data on LinkedIn, bring in the relationship information onto the LinkedIn records as well in that UI. So we are building that out. I think this is kind of the first stage for us to kind of provide this org charting, account mapping capabilities, really advanced tools to that end. And for my team, really the goal is what I said earlier. We want to understand who are the people I can talk to and who are the people I want to talk to, right? And that's really where we're building around the deals, that we're going into more using buying personas. We're going into more using deal information, figuring out like who are the contacts. Very often you don't really understand like who are the contacts we are talking to about this deal and who are contacts we're talking to about that deal, and how can those like cross relate together, right?
Yeah, I really like the visual overview and that you strongly rely on all data points that are actually living in HubSpot, if I'm correct, right? So all the properties that you're seeing here, probably also the associations are living in HubSpot and can be updated through this visual model as well. Nice. And since you're heavily relying on those properties and associations in HubSpot, could you share some best practices on associations? Because I think that's one of the most important aspects of the app. You have like contacts and company associations, company to company associations. Like, what are your recommendations with these?
Yeah, so I think that's a super important bit where we are tooling into just through this drag and drop interface. It's making it very visual to, you don't need to click through different hierarchies, but it's also kind of coming back to the having the clean data, right? Because now when you decide to, you don't want to use vizrm anymore for whatever reason, you still have the associations in HubSpot, right? When you decide to move another tool, you have the information in HubSpot. So we are also adding back like statistics about the org charts on the company record. So you can add that. You can use that in reports, dashboards, but also some of our customers, they are having business logic in their sales pipelines. Like, I need to have a complete org chart if I want to move this to the next sales stage, right? So I think all of these are very good bits. The associations between records, I think, is an extremely well engineered bit in HubSpot. That's really flexible. Again, the best practice for me is to not over engineer those, because they can just become really complex. And unless you are like populating them in a very easy way, you're coming back to, it's just a bunch of work for reps to do. And I think through the drag and drop interface, that is definitely something that is easier, faster to do. And we are now working, right? My development team is working on adding an AI layer in kind of this. How do we sort all those contacts based on seniority, based on departments where they are, and kind of help this generation process of the relationships to automate in certain ways where it's making sense. So I think that's where we are tying in very nicely to kind of help understand those. And then perspectively, I think the real question is like, how are we going to maintain those up to date? Because we are in a situation where now we see that many of our customers, they are kind of in a maintaining relationship phase where they've built out, it's really inspiring to see like some of our customers, they have like 500 companies on an org chart and like thousands of contacts. So like, how do we maintain this? How do we track that people are disappearing, obviously, and that people are moving around? So we are right now conceptually putting a lot of thought into these problems as well.
Yeah, interesting approach, because indeed like 20 to 30% of people generally leave per year in organizations, so keeping them up to date must be a challenge as well. And I can imagine that it's probably important to keep it simple, the org charts. So I assume that you then recommend mainly using parent and child relations to start with, like have a head office and then the different sub offices. Like how do you fit the departments in those associations? Is that a separate company entity? Do you use other custom objects?
Yeah, so we are using a custom object for departments rather than a company. I think just because the follow-up processes after the sale, they are very dependent on that company information, right? So anything that goes into quoting, into invoicing, etc. I think it's tough to that end to kind of, you don't want to have a quote to the sales department, right? You want to have a quote to the company. So that's why I'm advising to that end to use more a custom object.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it always depends, but I can imagine that that's like the general guideline. Okay, cool. Very insightful and informative. Is there any final thoughts you wanted to share on data quality for sales, on the product?
Yeah, so I think like one of my experiences that I'm having with vizrm is that I help all of our customers to get started with vizrm. We're doing some onboarding, and the most stunning thing is when we first go into CRM and we search for an organization, and I get like, I don't know, like if it is Acme, which we've just used, the user types in Acme and we get like 50 results and they are like 50 companies. And we are supposed to build an org chart for Acme, right? And it's like, it's not like these are all like local subsidiaries that are making sense, but it's just like all of that is duplicate data, right? And I think that is a great point, I think, for people to realize how dirty their data actually is, because we start putting it on a canvas and it's suddenly like, my God, it's all of this stuff is there, but do I need this? No, I don't. And that's where we start by kind of in the beginning. So very often we just like, wow, okay, first we need to do some cleanup. First we need to do some deduplication. And that's, I think, where I experience in this role as a founder, a customer success person, quite a lot of these first encounters with dirty data. And I think that's a good thing because we help people to get it cleaned up, and then we help them to actually understand it. And the next step is really like helping them maintain it healthy and clean. I think that's where we can work together very nicely.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we see with Koalify as well, to help clients tackle their duplicates. And the associations that you mentioned, like sometimes it's a duplicate, but sometimes it's a subsidiary or a local organization and you want to set associations instead. So it's very often a decision,
Exactly.
Okay, what do we do with this company? Do we associate it because they're related, or do we merge it because we consider them as ones? So there's definitely some synergies in what we're doing. We should look into that even more in the coming weeks. Cool. Really great conversation. Love the insights and the angle from the sales point of view and the org charts, Markus. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Jonas.